Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. The Cabinet approves a compromise formula over the controversial resistance clause in its policy statement in a move that averted an open-ended government crisis. Russia and the United States failed to find a solution on the crisis in the Ukraine region of Crimea. And 6 army police officers are killed in an attack on a checkpoint on the outskirts of the Egyptian capital of Cairo. The Cabinet has approved a compromise formula over the controversial resistance clause in its policy statement in a move that averted an open-ended government crisis and cleared the way for a vote of confidence in Parliament. The draft policy statement, reached after more than 4 hours of backstage consultations held by rival ministers with their leaders ahead of the cabinet session at Babda Palace, stressed the right of Lebanese citizens to resist Israeli occupation, repulse its attacks, and recover occupied territories. It also emphasized the state's responsibility in liberating land still occupied by Israel in South Lebanon. But the 3 ministers representing the Kataib party in the cabinet voiced reservations over the amended version concerning the resistance clause. The Kataib party will convene to decide whether its ministers should resign from the cabinet. President Michel Sleiman says he understands the reasons why the Kataib party expressed its reservation over the resistance clause in the newly drafted government policy statement. He says the party's reservation stems from its keenness on the state. He adds that the Kataib party took such a position out of its historic role in maintaining Lebanon's independence, defending its sovereignty, and supporting the presidency. The president called on the party to maintain its national responsibility in the cabinet and to participate in the national dialogue because it is necessary for cooperation among the political powers. Sleiman encouraged the party to assert its authority of the state in all matters and in devising a national defense strategy. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri says the government policy statement that was drafted on Friday does not grant one party or power authority over that of the state. He said in a statement, several interpretations can be made over the policy statement, but one central truth is clear, and that is there can be no return to the army-people resistance equation. Hariri stressed there can be no room for doubt that the resistance's weapons is an issue of contention that will be discussed by the new president. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri calls for 2 legislative sessions this coming week to debate the Cabinet's policy statement ahead of a vote of confidence as the Kataib party considers pulling out of the government. Berri will convene Parliament on Wednesday and Thursday at 10:30 a.m. to begin discussions before MPs cast their vote of confidence for the 24-member Cabinet to effectively begin its work. And joining me on the line is founder of Salam Party, Monsieur Roger Edé. Monsieur Edé, can you hear me?
Yes.
What are your views about today's compromise formula?
What we have to think about is that we need a government and a functioning government because we have a big risk to not have a president-elect by May 25. And we may have to wait 6 months to a year to have a president. Now, the compromise is a creative confusion. From a popular point of view, it is rejected by the overwhelming majority in the Christian base, and the Maronite base, and in the Sunni base. This is why Hizb al-Kataib and Ashrafifi are expressing clear opposition because the public opinion is reserved. It is not clear that the resistance means Hezbollah. Now, we have all the right to be resistance, and anyone carrying arms can pretend to resist either a Syrian occupation or an Israeli occupation or any kind of occupation he can pretend to be, like an Iranian by proxy occupation through Hezbollah. The other issue is Hezbollah involvement in Syria. That has not been clarified in any way. This is why politically it's a disaster for the parties involved, yet we have to understand that without the government, we're running the risk of having a parliament that is not legal, as President Hosseini has said it this morning in Al-Nahar. We have a presidency that will be empty, and we will have no government, and that is the worst situation we can have.
What will the consequences be if Kataib backs out of the cabinet?
I think this government, now it's over. Now the cabinet will get its majority in parliament, and the cabinet will assume responsibility as a whole, filling the gap of the presidential election, or of the non-presidential election, and preparing for that election to happen in due time. And it will manage the minimum needed when it comes to administration, economy, the security apparatus. And that's necessary and vital.
Mr. Ede, I'd like to take some time to touch down a bit on Ukraine. Thousands of people rallied in central Moscow in protest at Russia's intervention in the country a day before the Crimean Peninsula is expected to vote on switching to Kremlin rule. Ukraine's acting president, Alexander Turchinov, has accused Kremlin agents of fomenting deadly violence in eastern cities. In one of the most direct and highest-level criticisms aimed by Kiev at President Vladimir Putin, Turchinov has warned of a risk of a Russian invasion of the east following Moscow's occupation of the Crimea Peninsula. Ukrainian officials have called on people in the mainly Russian-speaking cities of industrial east not to rise to provocation that Russia might use to justify sending troops. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry failed to either avert Sunday's ballot in Crimea or win Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's assurance that Moscow may delay annexing the Black Sea region. Mr. Ede, Kerry said the referendum was a violation of Ukraine law and its result would not be recognized by the U.S. and its allies. What do you think the consequences will be if the referendum reveals a yes vote?
Let me say two things. The bigger risk we are living right now, since yesterday night, is the occupation by Russian militias of eastern Ukraine, because Crimea in itself is not enough. If Crimea is out of Ukraine, then the Russians in Ukraine will never have any more a chance to have a majority, to have a government or a president as in the past. They will lose a substantial chunk of the electorate. Putin has underestimated President Obama because of his zigzags and weakness dealing with Syria. He is also underestimating Angela Merkel's reaction, thinking that the leadership in Europe, which is in the hands of the Germans, will be afraid of losing some economical advantage he's getting from a good price and from the supply of gas. He may be surprised to have his kleptocracy collapsing in Russia itself, because it is not anymore the Russia of Stalin and Lenin. It is a capitalist state with a capitalist leadership that is making hundreds of billions of dollars for its own pockets and its own companies, which will be threatened and can turn on Putin and bring him down. Mr.
Roger Ede, thank you so much for being with us today. That was Roger Ede, a Salam Party founder. And coming up next, Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak says the missing Malaysian Airlines aircraft was deliberately diverted. That and more after the break. Welcome back. The heads of UNHCR, UNICEF and Save the Children have visited a tented settlement in Lebanon and urged stronger international commitment to assist Syrian refugees both now and in the future. Syria's government has promised greater access for aid groups supporting millions of Syrians, but UNICEF says faster progress is needed to tackle a dire humanitarian crisis.
What we can do is to help prepare the children for someday going back. And I was so impressed with the last family that I met, with the father who is now teaching at an informal school here, and how the children over and over again said that what they want to be doing is studying, so that, as the little girl said, she can be a doctor. And when we said why, she said to help people. And if they want to help people, we need to help them.
The United Nations Security Council did unanimously agree a resolution on humanitarian access. So the first thing is we've got to get aid into Syria. Those are where the tragedy is worse. That's where there's most need. And we've not got to put into practice that resolution, but we've also got to end the war so everyone can go home. And we've got to redouble our efforts using the 3rd anniversary as a kickstart for that.
Knowing that 9 million people are displaced, between refugees and internally displaced, the largest population displaced in the world today. It's something that really should deserve a much stronger commitment of the international community to stop this war, first of all, and then to mobilize all resources for effective humanitarian assistance to the Syrian victims and for solidarity with countries like Lebanon.
6 army police officers have been killed in an attack on a checkpoint on the outskirts of Cairo. This is according to Egyptian state media. Reports say the attackers stormed the checkpoint in the Shubra al-Khayma suburb. Explosive disposal experts managed to defuse 2 bombs left behind by the attackers. This attack comes just 2 days after a soldier was shot dead as armed men attacked an army bus in the capital. The army blamed both attacks on ousted President Mohamed Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood. The group did not immediately comment on the latest attack, but it has strongly condemned the previous one, saying the targeting of army soldiers and civilians is a heinous crime that requires a thorough and transparent investigation to bring the perpetrators to justice. And now for news around the world in brief. Slovaks have begun voting in the first round of a presidential election that Prime Minister Robert Fico is poised to win, sparking concern that his party could monopolize power. Victory for the ex-communist Fico would mean the presidency, parliament and government is controlled by the same party, the Social Democrats, for the first time since Slovakia won independence in 1993. A Paris court has given a Rwandan former soldier a 25-year jail sentence for genocide and crimes against humanity during Rwanda's 1994 genocide. It was the first trial in France to punish those responsible for the 3-month wave of violence. Pascal Simbi Kangwa, 54, described by prosecutors as a former army captain who rose to become the number 3 in Rwanda's intelligence services, rejected the charges against him during the trial. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has warned airlines not to limit flights in and out of Venezuela, a day after reports a Colombian airline was reducing services to Caracas amid industry complaints of billions of dollars in unpaid debts. The rumors of airlines cutting back their flights to Venezuela comes amid deadly civil unrest across the South American country that has killed at least 28 people as student-led demonstrations demand Maduro's resignation. The Malaysian Prime Minister says that new information tells with a high degree of certainty that communications of the plane that went missing a week ago was disabled just before the aircraft reached the east coast of Malaysia. Prime Minister Najib Razak says the movements of the aircraft were consistent with deliberate actions by someone on the plane. Razak says that despite media reports that the plane was hijacked, they're still investigating all possibilities as to what caused MH370 to deviate from its original flight path. He adds that they have put national security second to the search for the plane, as this has been a situation without precedent. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. The Cabinet approves a compromise formula over the controversial resistance clause in its policy statement, in a move that averted an open-ended government crisis. Russia and the United States failed to find a solution on the crisis in the Ukraine region of Crimea. And 6 army police officers are killed in an attack on a checkpoint on the outskirts of the Egyptian capital of Cairo. Those are Saturday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice weekend.